They called her Challenger 3985. Built in wartime, designed to dominate the steepest rails in the West. For years, some argued she was more powerful than even the legendary Big Boy, yet her story slipped into obscurity. Why did this giant almost eclipse the icons and then vanish from history? To answer that, we have to start on the mountain grades where her myth began. Sherman Hill rises out of the Wyoming plains like a wall, climbing more than 2,000 feet in less than 60 miles. For the Union Pacific, this stretch was more than a route. It was a test. Freight trains grew longer and heavier, but the grades and curves remained unforgiving. Steam locomotives of the 1930s strained under the load, their rigid frames and limited power often forcing crews to double head or break trains into sections just to clear the summit. Union Pacific's engineers studied these problems with a clear goal: build a locomotive powerful enough to muscle heavy freight over mountain grades, yet nimble enough to handle the twisting tracks and sharp curves of the West. The answer took shape in the form of the 4664 Challenger. Its articulated design split the driving wheels into two sets, each with 6 massive drivers joined beneath a single boiler. This approach allowed the Challenger to bend through curves that would defeat a rigid locomotive of similar size while still supporting a huge firebox and boiler for sustained power. The Challenger's layout was not just about brute force. 4 leading wheels steadied the locomotive at speed, while 4 trailing wheels supported the firebox, allowing more fuel and more water for long hauls. The result was a machine nearly 122 feet long, weighing more than 1 million pounds, able to maintain speed and traction where others faltered. On Sherman Hill and the Wasatch Range, the Challenger became the railroad's answer to the mountains, a locomotive built not just to survive the climb, but to master it. 3 questions stand at the heart of any legend. How much power did it truly wield? How well did it conquer the grades? And how deeply did it leave its mark on the public imagination? For Union Pacific 3985, the answers begin with numbers, drawbar horsepower, and tractive effort, performance on Sherman Hill, and the stories that followed her down the years. These are the measures by which any claim to greatness must be judged. But before the comparisons and verdicts, there is the matter of birth. In the summer of 1943, the American Locomotive Company in Schenectady, New York, received the order for builder number 70174. Wartime rationing pressed on every corner of the factory. Steel, copper, and brass were counted by the ounce, each shipment justified to the War Production Board. The workforce shifted with the needs of the hour. Apprentices beside seasoned machinists, women at the forges and on the rivet lines, all working double shifts under the din of hammers and the glare of arc lamps. A rail historian recalled that building a Challenger in 1943 was a feat of engineering and endurance. The workers knew they were building something special, something that would help win the war. The heat in the boiler shop was relentless. Blueprints turned to hardware as frame, drivers, and boiler took shape, each inspection logged, every pressure test recorded. By July, the last bolts were tightened. Union Pacific 3985 stood complete, a product of urgency, sweat, and pride, ready to carry the weight of a nation at war. Union Pacific 3985 rolled out of Schenectady and into the heart of freight service, becoming a workhorse among the railroad's hardest working machines. Day after day, she took on the long grades of Wyoming and Utah, pulling everything from coal drags to merchandise trains with a steadiness crews came to trust. Engineers spoke of her as a gentle giant, responsive at the throttle, sure-footed on slick rails, and smooth enough to cradle a cup of coffee across Sherman Hill. The Challenger's articulated frame let her thread through tight curves where lesser engines struggled, while her boiler delivered the power needed for heavy loads and long runs. In the cab, firemen and engineers found a partner more than a tool, one that answered every call for speed or muscle with quiet confidence. Through the bitter cold of winter nights and the heat of summer afternoons, 3985 kept the railroad moving. For 14 years, until 1957, she was counted on not for spectacle, but for showing up mile after mile, train after train, a quiet and reliable presence on the rails. By 1975, Union Pacific 3985 sat outside the Cheyenne Depot, her paint dulled and her once bright metal streaked with rust. The roundhouse that had sheltered her after retirement could no longer offer protection. Wind swept across the Wyoming plains, carrying dust that settled into every crevice. Rain pooled on the running boards and froze in winter, splitting paint and leaving scars. For local rail fans, the sight was equal parts awe and heartbreak. Children pressed their hands to the iron, while older enthusiasts counted every missing bolt and broken window. They knew what made her special. Of more than 100 Challengers built, only 2 survived. The other, number 3977, stood silent in North Platte, Nebraska. Out in the open, 3985 faced a slow erosion, her rarity and size offering no defense against time or weather. Each season, hopes for rescue faded a little more, yet the steady footsteps of visitors and the quiet attention of Cheyenne's rail community kept a question alive. Hope lingered. Could she ever run again? In 1979, a handful of Union Pacific employees and local rail fans gathered in the Cheyenne Roundhouse, staring up at the hulking frame of 3985. The odds looked impossible: years of rust, frozen bearings, and missing parts with no official budget and no guarantee of success. But the group pressed on, trading sleep and weekends for hours beneath the locomotive, scraping decades of grime from steel, tracking down rare fittings, and improvising repairs when original parts could not be found. Welding torches sparked late into the night. Grease-stained hands passed tools from one volunteer to another, each person driven by the same belief: if they did not bring 3985 back, no one would. The volunteers stayed, working until the work was done. By 1981, after more than 2 years of relentless effort, the boiler held steam once again. On a cold spring morning, pressure built in the firebox, and the Challenger's whistle echoed across the yard. Word spread fast. Rail fans lined the tracks, cameras ready, as 3985 rolled forward under her own power for the first time in over 2 decades. Cheyenne erupted in cheers. The volunteers, exhausted and grinning, watched as the locomotive they had rescued from the edge of oblivion came back to life, not as a relic, but as a living, breathing machine. In 1990, Union Pacific 3985 underwent a transformation that would define her modern career. Shop mechanics replaced the coal-burning firebox with an oil system, fitting new atomizers and fuel lines to handle diesel oil. The change meant cleaner operation, fewer stops for fuel, and no more risk of stray embers setting fires along the right-of-way. With the conversion complete, 3985 returned to the main line, not just as a showpiece, but as a working engine. That same year, she led a 143-car double-stack freight out of Kansas City, a rare feat for any steam locomotive in the diesel age. The crew kept a close watch on temperatures and pressures, every gauge a test of the shop team's work. In 1993, when the Midwest floods washed out tracks and stranded trains, 3985 and her operators faced rising water and unstable rails. Dispatchers relayed updates by radio as crews walked ahead, checking for damage. The Challenger pressed on, her power and resilience carrying her through miles of uncertainty, proving she was built for more than museum runs. By 2010, the years had caught up with 3985. Inspections revealed worn bearings, boiler work overdue, and a long list of repairs that could no longer be postponed. The Federal Railroad Administration's 1,472-day inspection loomed, carrying a price tag Union Pacific could not ignore. In Cheyenne's steam shops, the mechanics weighed their options. With resources stretched thin, the company made a difficult call: focus on keeping the older 844 running and prepare Big Boy 4014 for a return no one thought possible. 3985 was carefully moved into storage, her fire dropped, and her future uncertain. For more than a decade, she sat silent, a giant in waiting, while other engines took the spotlight. Then, in 2022, Union Pacific announced a new chapter. The locomotive would leave Cheyenne, not for retirement, but for rebirth. The Railroading Heritage of Midwest America, a nonprofit with deep roots in restoration, accepted the challenge. Mechanics and volunteers greeted her arrival with a sense of mission. Where some saw a relic, they saw promise. Once again, hope gathered around the Challenger, now entrusted to new hands and a fresh start. Today, the restoration of Union Pacific 3985 is more than nostalgia. It is proof that engineering legacies still inspire new generations. As she returns to steam, the question is not which locomotive was biggest, but who will keep their stories alive. History moves forward on rails we choose to preserve. Thanks for watching.